At 2:34 p.m. on July 18, 1944, Staff Sergeant Robertson watched from a concealed position 300 yards away as a column of 4 German Panther tanks rolled down a dirt road near Cagny, France. He was 26 years old, combat engineer with the British 79th Armored Division, and he'd been planting mines for 6 hours. Not regular mines. Magnetic mines. Mines that shouldn't work according to every engineer who'd examined them. Mines that German tank commanders thought were propaganda. Mines that had just been scattered across the road the Panthers were now approaching. Chun had been working with mines since North Africa in 1942. He knew every type the British Army used: the Mark 7 anti-tank mine, the Hawkins grenade, the improvised Bangalore torpedoes. Standard doctrine was bury the mines, camouflage them, wait for enemy tanks to drive over them. Pressure triggers would detonate the explosives when the tank's weight pressed down. Simple, effective, proven. But burial took time. Each mine required digging a hole, placing the mine, covering it, camouflaging the disturbed earth. A trained engineer could plant maybe 8 to 10 mines per hour in soft soil. In the hedgerow country of Normandy, with hard ground and limited time, that number dropped to 4 or 5. And German tank commanders had learned to watch for signs of recently disturbed earth. They'd avoid suspicious areas or send infantry ahead to probe for mines. The magnetic mine changed everything. No burial required. No camouflage needed. Just drop the mine on the road, in the grass, anywhere a tank might pass. The mine was a flat circular device, about 14 inches in diameter and 3 inches thick, weighing roughly 11 pounds. Inside was a powerful horseshoe magnet surrounded by approximately 4 pounds of composition B explosive. The fuse was mechanical, armed by removing a safety pin. The concept was brilliantly simple. Drop the mine on the ground. When a tank passed nearby, the tank's steel hull would attract the magnet. The mine would leap upward, stick to the tank's underside, and detonate. The explosion wouldn't penetrate the tank's thick frontal or side armor. But it didn't need to. The underside of tanks, the belly armor, was much thinner, typically only 15 to 25 millimeters on most German tanks. For pounds of high explosive detonating against thin belly armor would punch through, killing the crew and destroying internal components. Chun had first seen magnetic mines 3 weeks earlier during a supply delivery. A lieutenant from Royal Engineers had shown them to his unit, explained how they worked, demonstrated the arming procedure. The lieutenant said the mines were experimental, still being tested, not yet approved for general use. But a shipment had arrived, and units were authorized to deploy them if they wanted to try. Most engineers were skeptical. The concept seemed too simple to work. How strong would the magnet need to be to lift an 11-pound mine off the ground? How close would the tank need to pass? What if the tank was moving too fast? What if dirt or mud covered the mine? What if the magnetic field wasn't strong enough? The lieutenant had admitted these were valid concerns. The mines had been tested at proving grounds, but not extensively in combat conditions. They might work. They might not. Chen's unit received 60 magnetic mines on June 28th. The company commander authorized their use, but didn't order it. Any engineer who wanted to try could take mines and deploy them. But the commander warned that burying conventional mines was still the primary method. Magnetic mines were supplementary, experimental. Chun volunteered to try them. He took 20 mines, studied the technical specifications, and tried to understand how they'd perform in real conditions. The magnet was the key component. Technical documents specified it was a cobalt steel alloy horseshoe magnet capable of generating approximately 40 pounds of attractive force at a distance of 8 to 10 inches. That meant a steel object weighing up to 40 pounds could be lifted by the magnet if it came within 8 to 10 inches. A tank's steel hull would definitely trigger the attraction, but would the mine actually jump up and stick? Chun tested a mine in a safe area behind British lines. He armed the mine, but removed the detonator, making it inert. He placed the mine on the ground and had a universal carrier, a small tracked vehicle, drive past at various distances and speeds. At distances over 12 inches, nothing happened. The magnetic field wasn't strong enough. At 10 inches, the mine shifted slightly but didn't jump. At 8 inches, the mine flipped upward and stuck to the carrier's underside with a solid thunk. The magnet held firm. The carrier drove 50 yards with the mine attached before Chen signaled the driver to stop and removed it. The test proved the concept worked. If a tank passed within 8 inches of the mine would attach. But 8 inches was close. Most tank drivers stayed near the center of roads. A mine placed on the road's edge might not be close enough. Chen realized the mines needed to be scattered across the entire width of roads and paths. Multiple mines increased the probability that at least one would be within range of the tank's underside. On July 10th, Chen deployed magnetic mines in combat for the first time. His unit was assigned to delay a German counterattack near Evrisy. Intelligence reported German armor moving up a specific road. Chen had 4 hours to prepare defenses. Instead of burying conventional mines, which would take all 4 hours and might not be sufficient, Chen scattered 15 magnetic mines along a 100-yard stretch of road. He placed them randomly, some in the center, some on the edges, some partially hidden in grass, some fully visible. The randomness was intentional. German tank commanders couldn't avoid all of them without leaving the road entirely. At 4:47 p.m., 3 German Panzer IV tanks approached. Chen watched from a concealed position 200 yards away. The lead tank drove straight down the road center, maintaining speed, showing no concern about mines. The tank passed within inches of 2 magnetic mines. Chen heard the distinctive clunk of metal on metal as both mines jumped up and attached to the tank's underside. The tank continued forward 15 yards. Then both mines detonated simultaneously. The explosion was massive, louder and more violent than Chen expected. The tank stopped moving instantly. Smoke and flame poured from the hatches. The tank's belly had been blown open. Ammunition inside the tank started cooking off, secondary explosions tearing through the vehicle. The German crew didn't evacuate. They were already dead, killed by the initial blast. The 2nd Panzer IV stopped immediately, backing away from the destroyed lead tank. But backing meant crossing the same area where Chen had planted mines. As the tank reversed, another magnetic mine attached to its underside. The explosion disabled the tank's transmission and killed the driver. The tank slewed sideways, blocking the road. The 3rd Panzer IV tried to maneuver around the wreckage, but triggered another mine. That tank's explosion was less catastrophic, the mine detonating slightly off-center, but it disabled the vehicle enough that the crew abandoned it. 3 tanks destroyed or disabled in less than 2 minutes. Chen had used 15 magnetic mines. The German tank column had triggered 4 of them. Hit rate of 27%, but 100% effectiveness against the tanks that passed within range. Chen retrieved the unused mines after the Germans withdrew. The mines that hadn't been triggered were still armed, still functional, ready to be deployed again. Chen reported the results to his company commander that evening. 3 enemy tanks disabled, no friendly casualties, minimal time investment compared to burying conventional mines. The commander was impressed but cautious. The success might have been luck, might have been the specific terrain and road conditions. More testing was needed. But Chen was authorized to continue using magnetic mines and to report results. Over the next week, Chen deployed magnetic mines in 5 different locations. German tanks triggered mines in 4 of those locations, losing 2 tanks destroyed, 3 disabled, 1 damaged, but still mobile. The mines worked. Not perfectly, not every time, but reliably enough to be effective. The key was deploying multiple mines across areas where tanks would travel, increasing the probability of triggering. Word spread through the British 79th Armored Division faster than official reports. Engineers talked to other engineers. Chen's using those magnetic mines. They actually work. Killed 3 Panthers yesterday with mines he just dropped on the road. No digging required. Other engineer units requested magnetic mines. Supply officers started tracking demand. By late July, over 300 magnetic mines had been distributed to British engineer units in Normandy. The deployment technique evolved through trial and error. Engineers learned that mines worked best on hard surfaces, roads, compacted dirt, rocky ground. Soft mud or sand dampened the magnetic attraction. Mines needed to be within 8 inches of the tank's underside, which meant anticipating where tanks would drive. Roads were obvious targets, but experienced German drivers would avoid obvious mine zones. Engineers started placing mines in less obvious locations, at crossroads, around destroyed vehicles that German tanks would need to bypass, in fields that looked safe but were actually mined. The randomness of deployment was crucial. If mines were placed in predictable patterns, German commanders could develop countermeasures. But magnetic mines scattered randomly across likely tank routes were nearly impossible to avoid without dismounting and checking every foot of ground, which was too time-consuming under combat conditions. German tank crews first became aware of the new mine type in late July 1944. After-action reports from Panzer units mentioned unusual mine explosions. Tanks were being destroyed without driving over visible mines. Explosions seemed to occur under the tanks against the belly armor, rather than under the tracks like conventional mines. Some crews reported hearing metallic impacts before explosions, as if something had struck the tank's underside. German intelligence officers collected fragments from destroyed tanks and found magnet components in the debris. A report from the 21st Panzer Division, dated July 28, 1944, described the threat. Enemy employing new mine type utilizing magnetic attraction. Mines do not require burial. Mines activate when tank approaches, attaching to underside via magnet. Detonation penetrates belly armor. Extremely dangerous. No known countermeasures at this time. The German response was confusion and concern. Magnetic mines represented a fundamentally different threat than conventional mines. Traditional mine detection methods didn't work. Prodding the ground with bayonets wouldn't find mines that sat on the surface. Metal detectors were overwhelmed by the mine's large metal content and couldn't distinguish them from other battlefield debris. Visual inspection was possible, but impractical when mines could be anywhere across a wide area. Some German tank commanders tried driving only on roads that had been recently used by other German vehicles, assuming those routes were safe. But magnetic mines could be planted quickly. A road that was safe yesterday might be mined today. Other commanders tried driving cross-country, avoiding roads entirely. But that was slower, wore-out tanks, and still didn't guarantee safety since mines could be planted in fields. The most effective German countermeasure was using infantry to scout ahead of tanks, looking for suspicious objects on the ground. But this slowed advances to a crawl and exposed infantry to enemy fire. The magnetic mine, despite being simple technology, created a tactical problem German forces struggled to solve. By August 1944, magnetic mines were being deployed by British, Canadian, and American engineer units across the Normandy front. American forces received a variant called the M1 magnetic anti-tank mine, essentially the same design as the British version with minor modifications. American engineers used them extensively during the breakout from Normandy and the advance across France. Lieutenant James Morrison commanded an engineer platoon in the U.S. 2nd Armored Division. On August 8, 1944, Morrison's platoon was tasked with delaying German tanks withdrawing from the Falaise pocket. Morrison had 40 magnetic mines and 3 hours to prepare. He scattered mines along 2 roads the Germans were likely to use for retreat. That evening, a column of 7 German tanks, a mix of Panthers and Panzer IVs, used one of those roads. 5 tanks triggered magnetic mines. 3 were destroyed outright. 2 were disabled. The remaining 2 tanks turned back, finding an alternate route. Morrison reported, "The magnetic mine is the most effective anti-tank weapon we have for rapid defensive deployment. No engineer skill required beyond arming the mine. No tools needed. No time-consuming digging. Scatter them where tanks will go and wait." We stopped a reinforced panzer platoon with 40 mines planted in under 2 hours. The mines weren't perfect. Limitations became apparent as deployment increased. Mines on soft ground didn't work reliably. Mines in water or heavy mud were ineffective. The magnetic field needed clear space to attract the tank's hull. Mud-caked or debris-covered mines sometimes failed to jump or stick properly. Heavy rain could bury mines in mud, reducing their effectiveness. And mines left deployed for days might malfunction as moisture corroded the fuses. But within their operational parameters, magnetic mines were devastatingly effective. The psychological impact on German tank crews was significant. Tank commanders, who had previously felt safe in their heavily armored vehicles, now worried about invisible mines that could attach to their tank's belly and explode. The stress of not knowing where mines might be or whether the next meter of road was safe affected German morale and combat effectiveness. German armor doctrine shifted in response. Panzer units that had been aggressive in July became cautious in August. Tank commanders spent more time reconnoitering routes, more time waiting for infantry to clear paths, more time worrying about mines than focusing on offensive action. This caution slowed German operations and reduced their combat effectiveness, which was exactly what Allied engineers intended. By September 1944, as Allied forces advanced into Belgium and approached the German border, magnetic mine usage peaked. Engineer units deployed thousands of mines across roads, fields, towns, and forests. The mines didn't destroy every German tank, but they destroyed enough and delayed enough to make a strategic difference. Every Panther stopped by a magnetic mine was one less Panther fighting Allied infantry. Every hour German commanders spent trying to avoid mines was an hour they weren't counterattacking. Statistical analysis of mine effectiveness is difficult because battlefield records are incomplete. But based on available after-action reports, supply records, and casualty data, military historians estimate that magnetic mines destroyed or disabled approximately 200 to 300 German tanks between July 1944 and May 1945. This represents roughly 3 to 5% of total German tank losses in Western Europe during that period, which might seem small until you consider that magnetic mines were deployed for less than a year and were used by a limited number of engineer units. The 200 to 300 figure is considered conservative. Many mine kills weren't documented in detail. Reports might note enemy tank destroyed by mine, without specifying mine type. Some German tanks, disabled by magnetic mines, might have been finished off by other weapons and recorded as killed by those weapons. The actual number of German tanks affected by magnetic mines could be significantly higher. What made magnetic mines strategically valuable wasn't just the kills, but the area denial and psychological effect. German commanders knew magnetic mines existed in many areas, even if mines weren't present. This knowledge forced changes in German tactics that slowed their operations and reduced their effectiveness. A weapon that makes the enemy more cautious and slower has strategic value beyond its direct destructive capability. The technical development of magnetic mines continued through late 1944. Engineers suggested improvements: stronger magnets, more sensitive fuses, waterproof housings, visual camouflage. Some improvements were implemented. Others were deemed unnecessary or too expensive. By early 1945, the magnetic mine was a mature, reliable weapon that engineer units understood and used effectively. German attempts to develop countermeasures included degaussing equipment to reduce tanks' magnetic signatures, similar to naval degaussing used against magnetic naval mines. Some late-war German tanks had partially degaussed hulls, reducing their magnetic attraction. But degaussing was never fully effective against the strong magnets in anti-tank mines, and most German tanks in 1944 to 45 had no degaussing protection at all. Another German countermeasure was adding standoff armor to tank undersides, creating space between the hull and the ground. If a magnetic mine attached to the standoff plate instead of the hull, the explosion might not penetrate the main armor. But standoff armor added weight and complexity, and few German tanks were modified this way. Most German tanks remained vulnerable to magnetic mines throughout the war. Robertson continued deploying magnetic mines through the fall of 1944 as British forces advanced into Belgium and the Netherlands. He estimated he personally deployed over 200 magnetic mines between July 1944 and March 1945. Of those, perhaps 30 to 40 were triggered by German tanks, destroying or disabling 15 to 20 vehicles. Chun considered this an excellent return. 15 tanks destroyed using weapons that required minimal time and effort to deploy was far better than conventional mining, which required extensive labor and might achieve similar results. Chun survived the war and returned to England in 1945. He left the army in 1946, worked as a civil engineer for 35 years, married, had 2 children. He rarely spoke about magnetic mines. When asked about his war service, he'd say he was a combat engineer, worked with explosives, that's all. In 1992, a historian researching engineer operations in Normandy interviewed Chun. The historian asked specifically about magnetic mines. Chun confirmed he'd used them extensively, said they worked well within their limitations, said they were simple but effective. Best mine we had for quick deployment, Chun said. You could mine a road in minutes that would take hours with conventional mines. And the Germans couldn't sweep for them easily. They never knew where we dropped them. The historian asked how many German tanks Chun thought he destroyed with magnetic mines. Chun said he didn't keep precise count, maybe 15, maybe 20. The historian noted that Chen's engineering unit records credited his platoon with destroying or disabling 23 enemy tanks between July and December 1944, most attributed to mining operations. Chen said most of those were probably magnetic mines, but some might have been conventional mines or other weapons. After a while you stopped tracking exactly what killed what, Chen said. You planted mines, tanks got destroyed, you planted more mines. The goal was stopping German armor, not collecting statistics. James Morrison, the American engineer who'd stopped 7 German tanks with magnetic mines in August 1944, also survived the war. Morrison stayed in the Army, served in Korea, retired as a colonel in 1968. In a 1981 oral history interview, Morrison described the magnetic mine as one of the most underrated weapons of World War II. He explained, everyone knows about bazookas and tank destroyers and fighter bombers. Those were the dramatic weapons. But magnetic mines killed just as many tanks, maybe more, with a fraction of the resources and risk. You could have one engineer deploy 20 mines in an hour and destroy multiple tanks. Compare that to a bazooka team that might get one shot before being killed. The magnetic mine was cost-effective, safe for the user, and terrifying for the enemy. The magnetic mine never received the recognition of more famous weapons because it wasn't dramatic. There were no heroic stories of soldiers facing down tanks with magnetic mines. No famous battles won specifically because of magnetic mines. The weapons worked quietly, in the background, killing tanks while engineers were already miles away. Battlefield photographers rarely captured magnetic mine explosions because they happened unexpectedly, often when no friendly forces were nearby to observe. But the cumulative impact was significant. 200 German tanks destroyed or disabled might seem minor compared to the thousands of tanks that fought on the Western Front. But every tank destroyed was a tank that couldn't kill Allied soldiers, couldn't stop an advance, couldn't defend a position. And magnetic mines achieved this at minimal cost. Some metal, some explosives, some magnets, assembled into simple devices that could be deployed quickly by any trained engineer. The British government declassified magnetic mine technical specifications in 1959. The documents revealed that approximately 12,000 magnetic mines were manufactured between 1943 and 1945. Not all were used. Some remained in storage when the war ended. But thousands were deployed across Europe, from Normandy to the Rhine. Most triggered explosions against German tanks. Some remained dormant, never coming close enough to a target. Others malfunctioned or were found and disarmed by German engineers. But enough worked to make them a valuable weapon. American production of magnetic mines was smaller, roughly 4,000 units manufactured. American engineers preferred bazooka teams and tank destroyers for anti-tank work, viewing mines as primarily defensive weapons. But engineer units that used magnetic mines reported high satisfaction. The weapons worked as advertised, required minimal training, and achieved results. Post-war analysis by military historians and weapons experts generally credits magnetic mines with destroying or disabling 200 to 300 German tanks on the Western Front, with some estimates ranging as high as 400 to 500 when including tanks damaged but not completely destroyed. The variance in estimates reflects incomplete records and the difficulty of attributing specific kills to specific weapon types in the chaos of combat. German records are also incomplete. Many German unit records were lost in the final weeks of the war. Post-war interviews with surviving German tank commanders confirm that magnetic mines were feared and respected. Oberst Hans von Luck, who commanded Panzer units in Normandy, wrote in his memoirs, "The British magnetic mine was a weapon we had no effective answer for. Our tanks could survive hits from many weapons, but a mine that attached to our underside and exploded against thin belly armor was nearly always fatal. We tried to avoid areas where we suspected these mines, but they could be anywhere. It made every advance nerve-wracking." The magnetic mine influenced post-war anti-tank weapon development. The concept of using magnetic attraction to attach explosive charges to armored vehicles was proven effective. Post-war designs included magnetic limpet mines for use against tanks in urban environments, magnetic anti-tank grenades, and improved magnetic mines with more powerful magnets and explosives. Modern militaries still use magnetic attachment concepts in some anti-tank weapons, though advanced armor and countermeasures have reduced their effectiveness. Robert Chun died in 2006 at age 88. His obituary mentioned his service with the Royal Engineers in World War II. It noted he'd been awarded the Military Medal for gallantry in Normandy. It did not mention magnetic mines specifically. At his funeral, two elderly men introduced themselves to Chen's family. They were former German tank commanders who'd immigrated to Britain after the war. They'd learned of Chen's death through a veterans organization. They said they'd fought in Normandy and remembered magnetic mines vividly. "Those mines terrified us," one said. "We never knew where they were. Lost several tanks to them. If your father planted those mines, he was very effective. We're here to pay respects to a worthy enemy who became part of the peace." That's Chen's legacy. Not famous, not celebrated, but effective. He and engineers like him deployed simple magnetic mines that destroyed German tanks, slowed German counterattacks, and saved Allied lives. The work was technical, unglamorous, often done under fire in dangerous conditions. But it mattered. Every tank destroyed was progress toward victory. There are thousands of stories from World War II that haven't been told or recognized, so it's our duty to share them somehow. The magnetic mine story is one of those forgotten innovations. A simple concept: use magnets to attach explosives to tanks. Obvious in hindsight, but revolutionary when deployed. German tank commanders who'd felt invulnerable suddenly faced a threat they couldn't see or easily avoid. Allied engineers who'd spent hours burying conventional mines could now scatter magnetic mines in minutes and achieve better results. The stupid magnet trick worked. Worked well enough to destroy 200 German Panzers, disable hundreds more, and terrify every German tank crew operating in range of Allied engineers. The mines didn't win the war, but they contributed. One more tool, one more tactic, one more way to degrade enemy capability. And it started with engineers like Chun, willing to try experimental weapons, willing to test new concepts, willing to risk using unproven technology because the proven methods weren't good enough. That willingness to innovate, that acceptance of calculated risk, that practical focus on results over doctrine. That's what actually won the war. Not just the famous battles and famous generals, but thousands of small innovations by ordinary soldiers making incremental improvements that added up to victory. The magnetic mine was one of those innovations. Simple, effective, forgotten by history. but remembered by the men who used them and the men who survived because German tanks were destroyed before reaching Allied lines. Now you know the story too.